So, on the 4th of July, that was yesterday, we had our general election in the UK. I just thought I'd go through the results and talk about what's on my mind from seeing the results today, both about the new government that we're in, but also the future of British politics. So I'll go through the results first. At the time of recording, there are 2 seats to go. 2 seats are still counting, recounting, doing what they need to do to be able to announce their results. But we'll go through what we have now. It's a very clear majority, and then we can talk about the future that this is for British politics. So we have Labour as a very clear winner with 412 seats. Conservatives coming in second place with, at the moment, 121 seats. Liberal Democrats are following behind with 71 seats. Scottish National Party following in at 9 seats. Sinn Féin, I really hope I pronounced that right, coming in with 7 seats, and other, so independent candidates, smaller parties, this and that, have a total of 28 seats over the UK. So that's our results. Again, at the moment, that's going to change with the 2 seats, not majority, but the exact numbers are going to change just slightly. And yeah, let's get right into it. So what this means immediately is after 14 years, the Conservatives are done. They're not the leaders anymore. We're going to change from Conservative government to a Labour government. I believe Rishi Sunak is in the process of resigning. There's a bit of it's like in the US, not that it goes on for a very long time, but there is technically still a handing over process. So we're going to be in that for today or maybe the next couple of days, just while Starmer sets up his new cabinet too. I think the most senior people in the new government are going to be organised today, and then more smaller roles would just be filtering through over the next couple of days as well. That's going into mid next week, of course. So, you know, the Tories, some of them did think that they shouldn't have done the election today. As soon as the election was announced, with a lot of Tories not actually knowing Rishi Sunak was about to say that, they did think, well, maybe we should hang on a little bit longer, because, you know, inflation was falling and energy prices were going down as well. I think they're going to keep on going until maybe the end of the year when they'll rise with winter. But, you know, prices were starting to go down. So, yeah, again, some of the Conservatives did think that they should have held on for a little while longer to see fairer results. But I don't think it would have changed the ultimate outcome. Since the COVID parties, really, with Boris Johnson, there's been a change in, well, a slow change, obviously, but there has been a change in politics. With local elections, you'll see that a lot of Labour gains have been made and Tory losses. That's been very clear over the past few years. But also in the few by-elections that we've had too, where again, it's been very obvious that the Tories were on a losing streak, and it has just continued today, unfortunately. So it's been an annihilation for the Tories there. There's been people that I've talked to, as well as myself, that wanted to see more damage done to the Tory party. I know people who were very careful with their tactical voting did want the Liberal Democrats to come in second place, so that we wouldn't even have a Tory opposition. We would have a Liberal Democrat opposition there, but it just wasn't meant to be. Again, at the moment, they've got 71 seats. The 2-seat difference at the moment isn't going to make a difference to that. So, yeah, the Conservatives will be the opposition, and it will be a question of, will they stay the opposition for very long? We've had 14 years of the Tories. How long are we going to have of this new government? And again, there's some things I want to talk about with non-mainstream parties too that is going to be very important in the next couple of years. So that's just where we are right now. The Tories, they're not completely scrubbed off the face of the earth, but they're certainly on hard times, and it's going to mean some change in the UK. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about today was Great British Energy. So this is something that's in the Labour manifesto, and I'm quite excited by it, but I have some worries too, just about the impact that they can have. So Great British Energy is going to be a new publicly owned company set up by the new government, and it will be in place to work with industry and trade unions to invest in new green technology, support capital-intensive projects, and deploy local energy production schemes nationwide. They'll put £8.3 billion into this. I'm just reading off what it says now in their manifesto. What I'm most excited about all of this is the local projects that this could foster. So that's mainly going to be onshore wind and solar, but they do also mention hydroelectricity projects as well. In Southampton, just locally where I am, we have an energy scheme of our own. It's actually the first, and I think at the moment only, geothermal power scheme. It is very green, of course. It helps to power a lot of commercial, public and other private buildings in the city centre, and there's a local heat network as well. So of course geothermal, it's based in, I believe, the Wessex Basin, about 1.7 kilometres into the ground, where the water's very warm, and that's used to generate some energy, but also through the heat network to heat some buildings as well. It produces about 26,000 megawatts, 1 kilowatt, so that's how many kilowatts would that be? About 2600,000, I suppose. That's how many kettles you'd be able to boil with that energy. So it's a little bit of energy, you know. It's not a great deal, but it does help to subsidise some buildings there and some costs. It also produces 80,000 megawatts of heat, which I believe especially helps to heat the hospitals, but probably also the civic centre and just some other buildings in that immediate vicinity as well. It also has cooling systems to chill water, and we could see more schemes like this, quite creative schemes, pop up to innovate really how we do heat our homes and generate power too. It'd be very exciting if, almost like grants for filling in potholes or doing transport schemes, if councils did have the opportunity to have energy grants, where if you put some research into it about, you know, not necessarily geothermal, but something like solar or onshore wind production, if you could maybe make a case for it about how much energy you could produce and such, if you could then go to central government and ask for the required funds, or this company, Great British Energy, to be able to get the funds to do a scheme. So it could mean lots of local towns and cities, not just maybe bigger areas like Southampton or more innovative places especially, could have their own schemes for solar panels on public buildings and maybe some private homes as well, and really help to produce a lot of energy. If this is done nationwide, it will really produce a lot of energy there, and it's all going to be green, which is great too. It's probably mainly going to be solar panels, but you know, if there are other ways to do geothermal, because that's quite a creative solution, and wind too, it really would help if, again, cities, councils, whatever, would be able to go to Great British Energy to get the money needed to set this up, and then hopefully it can reinvest in itself from there, maybe to grow over a few years, but just really help to subsidise energy bills too, because that's something that's a big problem in the UK now. It's been that way, I think, since 2022. I believe that's when energy bills really start to go a bit weird. So yeah, hopefully it can help with those. Labour seems to have rightfully agreed that energy production needs to increase in the UK, especially after Brexit. I believe as a little island, we do import a lot of energy from mainland Europe, so it would be good if we can do that to produce our own energy, because, well, not necessarily because of Brexit, again, because of costs and just the greenness of it, but I think there are a few tumultuous periods where our energy and the costs for our energy did depend slightly on the politics with the UK now and the EU. Maybe that was just some Daily Mail articles I saw a couple of years ago, but it would help to, you know, have our own independence, not necessarily because I was on the side for that, but because, you know, it's just the reality that we're in now. So we do need to produce our energy. There does also need to be an improvement in infrastructure as well. So with solar energy, for example, this might not be something a lot of people have thought about unless you could ever considered getting solar panels for your home. But with solar energy, you can produce energy all day that you're never going to use, because you're going to be out and about, you're going to be at work, you're not going to need to have your lights on because it's the day, or you're not going to be cooking warm food necessarily through the day. You might just have your fridges on and stuff like that. So you'll be producing energy when you don't need the energy. And the payback from having your own solar panels has never really been that great. It was good a couple of decades ago, but it's really not good now. It's about, I think, about 4 pence per kilowatt hour that you're importing onto the grid for energy you produce. So, you know, it's a big waste really with solar panel owners at the moment there. It does take a while to get your investment back. And a big issue with solar energy, especially, not necessarily with wind energy or hydro, but solar energy, is if we're having these nationwide schemes producing solar energy and getting electric for it. We're producing a lot of electricity when it's not needed for domestic homes especially, but also some companies. So we need to have an infrastructure improvement in the UK where we're able to store energy, where we're having not like massive battery packs, but some way to be able to store this energy so that it can be released into the night when the solar panels aren't producing energy. And yeah, maybe the infrastructure projects, maybe infrastructure improvement is going to be what they call these big capital projects that they're going to be investing in. It's something that needs to happen. Those capital projects, they're probably also going to be what incorporate hydroelectric power, because you're going to need a big infrastructure project to be able to take maximum use of hydro. They didn't talk about tidal power, which is something which should be really tapped in the UK. So being able to produce electric with the movement of the tide going in and out through the day, especially again in Southampton, we're quite a rare area. We've got two tides in a way. The tide goes in and out twice in Southampton. They're all on the Itchen River especially. So again, it's something that needs to be tapped into. Maybe they mean tidal with hydroelectric power, or maybe it's just something that council's got to be brave in asking for, and then it can include tidal. But with hydroelectric too, with mills and stuff like that, that is going to cost a lot of money. The main worry I had was with these capital projects and improving the infrastructure, regardless of whether that's to produce energy or store it, how much of the £8.3 billion that's going to take up. And that's not £8.3 billion today with the government starting, that's over this next parliament. So that's probably £8.3 billion over the next 5 years. So I'm not too sure if that will be enough to create a massive change. But we'll just have to see how it goes. It's disappointing in a way because the big reason why there's such an issue with infrastructure in the UK, not just with electricity, but also our waterways, reservoirs, stuff like that, is because of privatisation. It's because these companies, like I want to have an example of EDF Energy, they have foreign owners. What's interesting about E.ON Energy, I don't know how to pronounce it in French, but it is actually a French municipal company that works with the electricity department in France. So with that company especially, but any other foreign-owned company, all of those profits in the company, they're going to shareholders, they're going to France with the EDF, and if that's helping French people with their energy bills, but it's all going abroad. And there just isn't any will, I don't think, to reinvest the profits back into the system and get the infrastructure really moving. So at the moment, with this, not nationalisation, Green British Energy isn't a nationalisation of the energy system. It's kind of competing against what already exists. The Labour Party, or the Labour government now, is going to have a huge financial burden to do all of this improvement in the infrastructure, all of this reinvestment that the companies have been neglecting for decades. So that's going to be a big problem that they're going to run into. And I want to see how GBE goes. I want to see how it goes. But I think nationalisation would probably improve it a lot faster, make it a lot greener a lot faster, and I think another worry is GBE, is Great British Energy going to last? Is it going to last past this government, regardless of whether Labour's voted in or out again? What's going to happen? Are we going to see some real long-term improvements, or is it going to be just some short-term gains? It will, however, create a lot of jobs, which is something that I'm happy about. Of course, it's going to work with industry and trade unions and other energy companies too. So it should have a lot of specialisation in it, a lot of experience to be able to make sure that the schemes that happen, the work that happens, the projects that happen are things that are going to be successful. They're not going to be scrapped down the line after wasting billions of pounds, like HS2 or something like that there. So yeah, hopefully this is going to be a very smart thing with some very good gains there, maybe short term and medium long term, just depending on, of course, the projects themselves. They're going nationwide, but it's going to create a lot of jobs too, which is going to be perfect there. GBE, Green British Energy, will be headquartered in Scotland. Great British Energy will be headquartered in Scotland, where Labour says Scotland will become an energy powerhouse. So there's a lot of opportunity for wind and hydro, especially on Scotland, of course. It's just got, a really good terrain for it there. So it's going to be quite exciting to see the opportunities that are coming to Scotland, especially there. So that's something that is going to be good to hear about. I do wonder, though, if having Scotland as the headquarters and the energy powerhouse in the UK, this plan Labour had, I do wonder if that did help with the it helps Labour with defeating the Scottish National Party in Scotland. Did that help them get so many gains in Scotland? I'm not too sure, because I'm not well versed in Scottish politics, so I don't appreciate all of the nuance into what's happened in this last election, but I do think that did help a long way there. So the next segment, just talking about the non-mainstreamers. So a few things I wanted to talk about, going back to the election results directly. Of course, it's no surprise Labour's won. We knew that was happening again since the COVID parties during Boris Johnson's time there. It's been very obvious that Labour was going to win and do it quite spectacularly. But something that's caught a lot of attention is about two non-mainstream parties. So the Green Party, but a lot more attention is Reform as well. So Reform had a huge amount of media attention in the build up to the elections. The Greens arguably had a lot less. There's been some criticism about that. I think it's not been maybe as proportional as it could have been, but there's been a lot of excitement about Reform since really Nigel Farage came back into being the leader of the party. I think he's just one of those people where he has a big media following. I'm pretty sure he's on GB News at the moment, so again, big media following there. It's no surprise he did get so much attention during this, whether regardless of whether that was getting milkshakes thrown at him or anything like that there. But at the time of recording this video, both the Greens and Reform have had 4 seats. That's a gain of 3 for Greens and a gain of 4 for Reform. In terms of general votes, though, which is really exciting, maybe scary in a way, is Reform UK won approximately 4,080,467 votes in the UK. That's 14.3% of the vote share. Whereas the Green Party, that also had 4 seats, 4 MPs, had 1,936,042 votes, which is 6.8% of the vote share. Reform actually got more votes overall, more of a vote share than the Liberal Democrats. And I think that does scare a lot of people, especially because of the sort of characters that are in Reform still. It was only a couple of days ago that Darren Ingrouille, I hope I pronounced his name right, but I kind of don't because he said some mean stuff. He described autistic people as vegetables. So there's a lot of worry from people of colour as well as disabled people and queer people about what Reform will do now that they are Ministers of Parliament. Nigel Farage, the party leader for Reform, won his party in Clacton, as well as Carla Denyer, the co-leader of Greens, won in Bristol Central. Both of the party leaders have won, but it's very obvious what's about to happen. Nigel Farage has been in politics for a very long time. He's a Eurosceptic. He was one of the people that masterminded the UK Brexit referendum, but this is the first time he's an elected MP, and he will use his seat as his platform. That's what's going to happen next. There's going to be a rise in tension over race, welfare, equality, the rights and the privileges. Well, they don't have any privileges. The expectations that disabled people can have in the UK. Again, that guy, that Darren Ingrouille guy, he called autistic people vegetables. He might have left, and a couple of other people that said quite some racist remarks. One even about the former Prime Minister calling Rishi Sunak a very bad word for his race. They are still within Reform UK. And they have 4 seats now, and they will be using this as a platform. It's going to be like the rallies in Germany in late 1930s and 1940s. It's going to be very big what they have to say. And Carla Denyer, she needs to step up too. She needs to use her platform too as co-leader of the Green Party in such a way that she's not necessarily being reactionary and fighting against Farage as well, but she needs to fight for her values, or the Green Party values, regarding socialism, nationalisation, saving the climate and all that good stuff, just as much as Farage is going to be using, baiting and saying a lot on his platform too. We need to see a step up there. And more importantly, Labour, they need to get their policies right so there is not a rise in the far right in the UK. Again, over 4 million votes that they had, almost more than the Liberal Democrats. Conservatives got about 6 million in the UK. It was very, very close. They could have won a lot more seats if we didn't have a different voting system, which I will get into soon. But the Labour Party, they need to get it right with their government now. They've waited 14 years for this. They need to get their policies right, or otherwise, what could happen in the UK if we're seeing far right groups like Reform UK rise and get more and more popular. There's something that we need to be very, very careful about. So I think nationalisation is a big thing that the Labour Party again needs to talk about. I think they're going to need to go greater than Great British Energy. And also maybe talking about this with other topics like water companies, of course, with the sewage being dumped in the waterways. Interestingly, this is something that Reform UK has actually had in their policies. I think if Labour were the ones that actually implemented this, or of course I believe the Green Party talk about nationalisation a lot too, but if we can actually get that done, then that's going to take a lot of wind out of Reform UK's sails. I think welfare needs to be better supported. There's a lot of resentment, especially online on Facebook, where people seem to think that immigrants are treated with luxury. And that's caused it's not true, but that's caused a lot of resentment against, pensioners, disabled people and other British people about their expectations from the government and the help that they'll receive against, again, the immigrants. They're not treated with luxury, but against what they think is happening elsewhere. So that needs to be combated too. I think we need to see a rise in support for people in the UK. There needs to be more money in schools. There needs to be an improvement in free school meals and stuff like that. Again, so people don't grow up being told that there's these other groups being treated so much better when apparently they don't deserve that better treatment. Because again, it's not happening to immigrants or asylum seekers or whatever there, but it's something that needs to be fought against, and it needs to be supported anyway because the welfare system just isn't great in the UK. But it's something that needs to be looked at, especially to stop a rise in the far right. Just coming to the voting systems now, as I talked about, I'm a strong believer in removing the first past the post voting system. I believe proportional representation, especially with the single transferable vote, is the better option. So with the single transferable vote, you might already know what that is, but in case you don't, that's where when you get your little paper to fill in the polling station, you don't put a cross next to the name that you want. Instead, you number them from 1 down to however many they are, from most favourite to least favourite. And it's the most tactical way that you can vote, I believe. I think it's a very fair way of voting because, of course, you don't need to vote for a party that you wouldn't vote for normally just to keep a worser option from getting in. You'd be able to have your favourite option and say who they are and then number your favourites accordingly so you can have that tactical side still. So I think it's very good for that too. So, you could happily put your socialist parties as your number ones, or your some people would do it your party of women, or these smaller parties there that get maybe under 0.1% of a vote share. You can go with your heart with them, but then go tactically with the rest of your numbers with a single transferable vote. So I think proportional representation is the way forward there. That's what I was trying to talk about. But at the moment, if we had proportional representation, if we had that yesterday, we would have the rise in the far right now, and they'd be here to stay for a very long time. Labour, they got 33.8% of the vote share. Conservatives, 23.7%. Reform, 14.3%. Again, at the time of recording, there should be, compared to the Green Party getting 6.6% and having 4 seats, in a proportional system, there should be a lot more of Reform UK seats right now. But there isn't, because we didn't have that right now, but we should have proportional representation still in the future. But again, it just comes back to what Labour need to do specifically in this moment. They need to get their policies right so that we can have proportional representation. They used to really want them themselves. They probably don't want it anymore because they're the leaders, but they should still introduce proportional representation. But we need to counteract the rise in the far right so we can have a fairer voting system, but also a fairer society, so we're not descending into a sort of chaos with loads of smaller groups there. So it's got to happen, but again, the Labour Party, they need to get their policies right so that we can have it done right too. So in this segment too about non-mainstream outcomes, I wanted to talk about a few independents. So obviously the first one we want to talk about is Corbyn. He won North Islington. It's no surprise, he's been the MP there since I believe 1983, I think. That wasn't going to change because he was removed from Labour. He quite rightly stood as an independent candidate, and now the Labour Party have lost a seat there because of his removal. I won't go into that too much, but some other independent people that are worth mentioning is Adnan Hussein. They're an independent candidate in Blackburn. They won against Labour by under 200 votes. It was a very narrow margin there. In Dewsbury and Batley, an independent candidate, Iqbal Mohammed, won against Labour. One other very tight election result was between Labour's West Streeting and British Palestinian independent candidate, Liane Mohammed. The difference there was, again, a narrow margin, less narrow than Blackburn, but it was about 528 votes. So, again, there wasn't a lot in it, but there was a lot of Labour losses because of independent gains. And what we'll see in these examples, what we have seen in these examples, where they've lost out on these victories, is it's been independent candidates who are pro-Palestine and call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. That, again, is just another example of a policy that Labour need to get right now so that they've not completely disenfranchised the Muslim vote when we're going forward, because that's where it stands right now. Of course, there was a lot of Muslim voters that did vote for these candidates, both independently in other areas too, with losses and gains, with splitted votes and not. And yeah, we need to be very careful, otherwise we can even see what happens, like what happened in Shinford and Woodford Green. That was another very narrow margin where Labour and an independent candidate who was formerly Labour split the vote, and instead who came in was the Conservatives there. So yeah, we need to stand together, we need to get our policies right, and it's going to be the only way to stop the right-wing parties from winning. That's what's going to happen otherwise if we're not standing together. There's always been an issue in the UK, I think, where, well, not always, but there's been an issue as far as I've been alive in the UK, where it's been a bit like a bit of a joke, where the Conservative Party has been the right wing, and they've stayed together through thick and thin. Of course, they're splitting together right now with Reform, but then with the left wing or the centre-left wing parties, there's been dozens of them, and there's not been a clear answer of who to vote for. If you're in maybe not towns, not cities, but smaller areas where you've got to be more tactical, like in Wiltshire, where you've got to be more tactical with your vote, with who will wind up winning, because there's just been a constant split in the left wing. We're starting to see it in the right wing, which is pretty funny, pretty handy in this circumstance, but the left wing, it needs to do better, and Labour has to find it within themselves to be a left-wing party again, and they need to get their policies right, or it will be a very short victory that we're seeing right now. Just one final thing to talk about. So are the results today from voting yesterday, a win for trans people? So seeing the results for the general election has, for me, like other queer people I know, other disabled people I know, put a smile on my face. It was good to see that the Tories are out finally after over a decade, almost a decade and a half. We have finally said goodbye to the Conservative government in the UK. It's a sigh of relief too, I'm doing it there. It's relieving to know that we're not under Tory rule anymore. We are going to see some change, and things have been really dark under the Tories for trans people, arguably growing worse in the build-up to this election, possibly even worse than it's ever been in the UK for us. And so, yeah, it has been a sigh of relief seeing this change. However, Keir Starmer has too said some very bad things about trans people. He might not joke about us in the Chamber of Commons like Rishi Sunak did, but he has said some very publicly bad things about trans people. I think it was under a week ago where he did publicly say that trans women, even with a gender recognition certificate, should not and do not have the right to use single space places like a women's bathroom in, say, a shopping mall or a public space like that. That's completely wrong, by the way. We do have the right to do that. Maybe he thinks it's morally wrong, but we're totally allowed there for now, which is kind of funny because he used to be a lawyer. But he has said some bad things too. So on the face of it, we don't need to go any deeper than that, really. This is not a complete win for trans people, unfortunately. However, as this new government is formed over the next couple of days, when they get their cabinet members and their smaller bits and bobs all in place ready to run the country, we can at least hope as trans people that we're not going to be targeted as much as we have been in the past couple of years. There's no more culture war, so there'll be less of a target on our backs, but it's not a complete win still. So, we need to carry on with our trans rights protests, with our rallies, with our petitions. We need to keep on doing what we're doing, and hopefully this new government is more open to work with us and to improve our rights, and maybe just alter the prejudice that they do or might already have about us there. So things could improve, even though it's not direct improvement right now. We need to keep on lobbying for our rights, and if we do, hopefully we can get some wins as the trans community. If that doesn't happen, I really don't know what's going to go on in the future for trans people and just what our politics, what our protests are outside of elections, but something's got to change, and hopefully we can lobby easier with this new Labour government. That's it for me today. That's all I wanted to talk about. Again, just Great British Energy. It's something I'm most excited about, but also just the results in general for the general election there. So I'll leave that with yourselves to discuss. Feel free to go into the comments and say what you think this means for trans people. Are you interested in Great British Energy now and seeing what happens of that? I'll leave that with you. Feel free to leave a comment. I always like reading comments on my videos, and thank you for your time today. Have a good day. Happy Independence Day. Goodbye.